Okay, so 11th Annual Air Quality and Health Workshop podcast with Dr. Paul Van Binder, who gave us the first case study, the Fraser Surrey Docks Expansion and Public Health. So, questions I have for you. What is the proposal relating to the direct transfer coal facility at Fraser Surrey Docks?
So the proposal is that Fraser Surrey Docks, which exports a number of substances but not coal, would move into the coal business. But the current proposal is that 4 million tonnes of thermal coal from the Powder River Basin in the United States would come on trains run by Burlington National Santa Fe Railway across the Peace Arch border, along past a number of our communities, and then be unloaded at Fraser Surrey Docks. From there they'd be placed on barges up the Fraser River, down the Fraser River, and then up the Straits of Georgia to Texada Island, where they will be offloaded to deep sea vessels. There is a capacity for this to increase to 8 million tonnes per annum, but the initial proposal is for 4 million tonnes. They're suggesting that this might provide economic benefit of around 25 jobs to people at the port.
Okay, so what is the role of the health authority in this process?
Well, normally the role of a health authority or the role of public health under the Public Health Act is twofold. It's to provide advice to our municipalities about risks, and it's to demand mitigation of risks that are there. And these powers are very broad. You know, we have enormous capacity to make people stop doing things if we feel that this is a risk to the public or to the public's health. Unfortunately, in this particular situation, because this is a proposal, not actual activity, it turns out that our powers are insufficient to require full assessments of these without something actually happening. So if they'd actually started and we felt that there was too much coal dust or too much diesel or whatever, we could require them to do extra work to demonstrate safety, and we could require them to mitigate it if they were above guideline levels of safety. However, what we're finding in this setting is that we are unable to require activity, and what we're seeing is that individual regulators, and there are many involved, are each saying that they're not responsible for the overall process. So the two key groups are Port Metro Vancouver, a federal regulator, and Transport Canada, another federal regulator. Fraser Surrey Docks has applied to Port Metro Vancouver, and they're looking at the footprint of the docks themselves, and they'll make a decision based on that whether or not to permit it. Our concerns about the trains themselves, about the coal dust, the diesel fuel, the noise, various other things along the pathway of the transport from there all the way to Texada, potential emissions from the barges across into New Westminster, all those things have been unheeded on the basis that they're the responsibility of different federal agencies. We did see that Port Metro Vancouver forwarded our letter to the Minister for Transport and various others, and we're expecting that at some stage they will reply. It's only been 9 months, so we anticipate that that should come soon.
I see. So this is a long, involved process. Nobody wants responsibility ultimately.
Well, I think what each of the agencies are saying is that we have very defined responsibility. Nobody has responsibility for the global process from the Peace Arch border through to the departure at Texada. We're only going to deal with our particular issue. We're not responsible for the other aspects. That's up to somebody else. And if we feel that there are no concerns with our individual issue, then we don't feel that we need to address the others. This, of course, is not what the community is saying. It's not what the municipal governments are saying. It's not what the local members down in the White Rock area are saying. They've all come out against it. There's lots of coalitions that have put their hand up and said we're not happy. There's one that raised 12,000 signatures from the public saying we want a proper assessment beforehand. So people largely aren't saying we don't want to do this. What they're saying is we shouldn't do this until we have proper information about the totality of the proposal.
So are there specific air quality and health concerns that have been raised?
Absolutely. I mean, there are always air quality issues raised about the coal dust, and there are air quality issues about particulate matter itself. and their air quality issues about diesel. So we know we'll have increased diesel emissions as we get more trains through these areas. And they're very close to the residential areas and the very pristine areas down in White Rock and so on. And we do know that coal dust in its worst setting in families who live near mines has been associated with lots and lots of specific respiratory concerns. In particular, diesel has got problems with cardiovascular health and cancers, and we know that just combustion dusts themselves, at very small levels can get into the lungs and produce problems. So what we know is that these products produce significant health impacts. What we don't know is whether there's enough of them happening in this particular proposal for us to really be concerned. And so we know this is not a coal mine. But what we don't know is whether or not what we're going to get is safe, or whether we should be doing more mitigation. And this is not a yes or no. This is, are you doing enough to protect the public? And so we've had a lot of reassurance at different times, and then we've seen evidence that shows that the reassurance is in fact not based on scientific processes. So the BNSF Railway said, well, we don't want coal dust coming from our cars, because obviously that means less coal that we're selling, so we want to keep it on the cars and then give it to Asia. And they said, we've put a surfactant on to try and protect our economic interests, and that's got rid of 85% of the discharges, which used to be hundreds of kilograms per rail car, and that most of it, in fact, is actually lost in the first 5 kilometres from the mine. Now, it never made a lot of sense to us why it would be lost in the first 5 kilometres when the surfactant was greatest, and less after it's been rubbing against each other all the way down, hundreds and hundreds of kilometres of railway. And then at the end of that, there's lots and lots of videos on YouTube and other things which shows these massive plumes of coal dust out in the White Rock, South Surrey area. So, the proponents are reassuring us that this is not an issue, and then the videos and the vox pops from the people who live there saying, well, actually you're wrong, and here's proof of that's the case. And I think this is why, the public are totally frustrated with the sorts of information they're being given, the reality of what's happening, and the fact that they're saying, well, we need more information before somebody goes and just ticks this.
So is there a time frame beyond which the proposal is defunct?
Well, in fact, there was a proposal that was put forward, and Port Metro Vancouver obtained public commentary and assessed it. The public commentary finished in December. About a week and a half ago, Port Metro Vancouver put out a statement saying that they agreed with the concerns that there were insufficient health information provided by the proponent, and they wanted more. But sadly, and I'm sure to the anger and frustration of the public, what they then said was they've asked for more information, they'll assess the information and then make a decision. There'll be no further public consultation, and there'll be no further information provided for commentary by health organisations. So they've essentially said, yeah, we understand people aren't happy, and we agree there's not enough information. We've told them to give us more, but when they do, we're going to deal with that internally and then make a decision. And so there's no further process. Now, Dr. Daly, who's my equivalent in Vancouver Coastal, and I wrote to Port Metro saying, we're pleased they've recognised the deficit. We'd like the opportunity to talk to the consultants and explain what we think should be done and have input to the outcome that's produced, so that we can reassure the public that health's involved and health is comfortable with where we're at. Port Metro Vancouver have replied to us saying that they're comfortable with their consultants. So they've essentially ruled a line in the sand and said, we're going to get some more information, then we're going to decide, and all of the public consultation process is over. I don't believe the public will be reassured by an internal federal agency regulator process.
Probably
not.
No. Well, it sounds like this is an issue that isn't going to go away for quite a while.
What I anticipate is that information will be provided to Port Metro Vancouver, and they will permit the development. And then there will be widespread concern expressed by the community, elected officials, municipal governments. What happens from there is unclear to me. Certainly we will be looking, if this goes ahead, to undertake verification processes. If they're saying, look, we're comfortable, our computer says this is not a problem, we'd want to see some air quality monitoring and other processes to say, well, you say it's not a problem, let's prove to the public that you were right when you made this decision, without allowing further input.
So you're really powerless until they get it underway, but once it's underway, you have...
Once it's underway, then if we can demonstrate there's a health hazard, then all of a sudden the public health comes into play, and we can require Fraser Surrey docks to undertake certain activities at that particular point to either demonstrate improved safety or to mitigate against what's happening.
It seems to me that the delay would be less if the consultation was done first, but perhaps that's too logical.
No, and I can remember having discussions with the Chief Executive of Fraser Surrey Docks a year ago saying, work with me, the public will be reassured, everybody will be reassured, and you'll be at the end of this point much earlier than if you decide that you're going to ignore health, and in the end that wasn't the decision they made to work with us. We're disappointed. They felt that the risk of a health impact assessment not being favourable would have an impact on the whole coal industry in British Columbia. They'd seen some activity that took a long time down in the western northern parts of the United States, and I think they felt that they didn't trust the process enough to do that, and they were going to go down their own separate pathway. There are certainly people who feel that these processes are nearing the end of reasonable use by dates in their current open cars and open barges and everything else. It's becoming harder for the Powder River Basin to ship their coal out of Oregon, Washington State. While this is only 4 million tonnes, there are proposals south of the border for 200 million tonnes of additional export.
Oh my goodness.
And it's proving difficult to work through the processes down south. I don't think anybody believes, if this was something that was easy to do in the US, that the US rail lines would want to go out of Vancouver. I mean, why wouldn't you stop 500 kilometres before here and save yourself the extra rail traffic and just ship it out of Oregon or something similar? The fact that they're saying it's becoming difficult in the US, we'll give it to Vancouver, is another part of the reason why the public is unhappy that we're becoming the the portal for activity that groups south of the border are saying, we're not sure this is something we want to do.
Well, that does answer my questions, but leaves a whole lot of other questions unanswered, and I don't see them being resolved anytime soon.
I think this is going to go on for quite some time.
Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
You're welcome.